Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about Utah. We are a couple of days away from the official first regular season game for the Utah Hockey Club. They're going to be called the Yeti. We know they're going to be called the Yeti. I thought it was funny as some people going, "Oh, Keller spoiled the it's a spoiler for Keller to say they're going to be called the Yeti." I don't think that Keller knows for sure, but I think he can read the tea leaves as well as any of us can that that's where it's headed. So the Utah Hockey Club, officially at this point, start their season on Tuesday. And they started at home. And it could be a good start for them. They're against Chicago, and we'll talk about their schedule. But this is a team that I think is going to be competitive. Everybody starts with 0 points. So, yes, Colorado, Dallas, Nashville, Winnipeg, maybe even St. Louis could be the top five teams in this division. But again, nobody has any points right now. So for Utah, you just go out there, you play your game, and you do your best. And so we'll see how it goes. I do like the line, and again, the line combinations I got off Daily Faceoff. One of the sites I use for line combinations because lines change in game, lines change often, and so I don't worry too much about who's on what line. But looking at the combinations here, the top line is an intriguing one to me. 2022, 2023, the second half of that season, the line of Keller, Hayden, and Schmaltz was very good. Hayden then this past season dealt with injuries, only played 33 games, had 3 goals and 7 assists. So when he was in the lineup, he wasn't productive, and he was not in the lineup often enough. A good start is really important for Barrett Hayden. But Keller and Schmaltz, obviously Keller being the captain, Schmaltz now being a veteran in the National Hockey League. If this top line clicks, they're going to put some goals on the board, which would put a second line as McBain, Cooley, and Gunther. I don't know if McBain stays there. I feel like Lawson Krause with Cooley and Gunther would make some sense. And I say that because Krause is a big physical forward. He can put the puck in the net and he can clear other guys out. And so with Cooley and Gunther both being on the younger side, I think having a veteran Krause there could be important. But McBain could help too. McBain had 8 goals this past season. Krause had 23. So if they do roll these lines, they have 3 scoring lines because you have McBain, Cooley, and Gunther. Both Cooley and Gunther are expected to score at a much better rate than they did this past season. Gunther in 45 games had 18 goals, 17 assists, 35 points. And I know that the contract Gunther just signed turned some heads and garnered some laughter too because fans are still adjusting to the fact that GMs now pay for what a player's going to do, not for what a player's done. So there's some guesswork, there's some gambling that goes on with those contracts, but that's just how contracts are done now. Guys come out of their entry level contract. Bridge deals are only for players who haven't proven themselves or for players who aren't seen to have a really high ceiling. Gunther's seen to have a pretty high ceiling, so you want him locked up long term, and that's what they've done with Gunther, which would put Krause, Kerfoot, and Michelli as that third line, which is fascinating because I honestly think these two lines here, you could interchange them. You could have Krause, Kerfoot, Michelli as the second line, McBain, Cooley, and Gunther as third line. I think ice time probably pretty balanced between the top 3 lines. One to keep an eye on is Carcone. Carcone started off really hot, cooled off a bit in the second half. He had 21 goals overall. I don't know if he's going to score 20 again. It feels like 21's pretty high, but with Stenlund and Doan as line mates, if that's how it ends up working out, this is a line that could put the puck in the net a bit too. Stenlund had 11 goals in 81 games last season for Florida, and Doan had 5 goals in 11 games. I don't think Josh Doan's going to be a big scorer in the NHL. I think he just had a really good run at the end of the season, but still, good young player, and we'll see, right? So the blue line is where I see. I'm not going to say like necessarily weakness that might cost them a playoff spot, but I don't know if the blue line's going to be good enough in what's going to be a very competitive Central Division. Sergachev played 34 games this past season, so one more than Barrett Hayden. Had 2 goals and 17 assists for 19 points, so that's 9 more points than Hayden. A lot of expectations on Sergachev. He's going to have more responsibility in Utah than he did in Tampa because he's not playing with Edmund. Valimaki's an interesting one. Valimaki's one of those reclamation projects they've had. They've definitely had some reclamation projects. Players that have come in without a lot of fanfare. Lawson Krause was one as well. And it turns out that they developed those players pretty darn well. Ian Cole joins the team from Vancouver. You could have him paired with Dursey, which makes a lot of sense. Dursey's all offense. Cole's a defensive defenseman. And so that balances out. And then Kolyachonok and Kesselring likely is the third pairing. But you have Bortuzzo there too, so you can rotate one defenseman out, put Bortuzzo in. But things are pretty well set. Obviously, with the forward group, players that are still on the roster right now, as I'm recording this, at least were when I started putting the board together. And I say started because Villalta's gone on waivers since I put this board together. So O'Brien, Douglas, and Lipkin listed as the extras on this board because they're still on the roster going through the NHL app for that information. Douglas is an interesting one. Isn't he like 6'8" or something like that? He's a massive player. But we'll see who ends up in the lineup and what happens because Bjugstad and Marino are on IR. They're not expected to be out that long. When Bjugstad comes back in, that's really going to fill out that forward group really well. It means that somebody gets bumped out. Maybe it's Stenlund. Maybe Bjugstad ends up being the fourth line center. Maybe you move Kerfoot to the wing. Again, there's all kinds of options you have here. And Marino on the blue line, he obviously would slot into that top four. I would think Marino could be with Dursey. You move Cole then down to third pairing. So, honestly, this is not a bad team. I don't know if people are sleeping on them necessarily. I feel like that term gets thrown around way too much right now. Anytime I do a video where I'm talking about standings, I always see people are sleeping on, and it's most of the teams that are below the playoff line. And so some of them could very well end up being pretty good this season, but a lot of them won't be, or at the very least won't be good enough to get above the playoff line. And Utah wants to be above that line, obviously. The goaltending tandem should not cost them any games. Ingram and Vejmelka as the tandem. Vejmelka is looking to upgrade his numbers from the .897 save percentage, not great, 13-19-2 record. Just the one shutout. Connor Ingram had 6 shutouts, finished 23-21-3. 907 save percentage. So Ingram, good story in Arizona. We'll be looking to continue that good story in Utah. But when we look at this team, and again, Villalta technically still on the roster, but he's on waivers, so they're going to send him down to the minors. They'll roll with Vejmelka and Ingram to the surprise of no one. But this is not a bad team. And you look at the schedule, it's not an awful schedule after a road trip here. So they start the season on Tuesday at home against Chicago. On Thursday, they're in New York against the Islanders, so they have to go to the East Coast. Saturday, they're in against the New York Rangers. So they got a day off in between a game against the Islanders and the Rangers. Not a lot of travel going from the New York Islanders to the New York Rangers. And then on Monday, they're in New Jersey against the Devils. So again, not a lot of travel going from MSG to over and playing in New Jersey. And a day off in between, probably going to make them pretty happy. On the 16th, they're at Anaheim. I did a double take looking at that one. So that's one thing to keep an eye on right there. That's an odd road trip. Then they come home. They have 3 games at home. They have Boston, Ottawa, and Colorado. But they have days off in between each one. So at the 16th, on the 16th, they're in Anaheim. 19th, they're at home against Boston. 22nd, they're at home against Ottawa. And then the 24th, they're at home against Colorado. So Boston and Colorado are going to be tough opponents, but they have lots of time off. They have time to get practices in, and this is key, right? Then they go to LA on the 26th. They come back home on the 28th to play San Jose, and on the 30th, they're at home against Calgary. So towards the end of the month, Ottawa, San Jose, and Calgary, those are games they should win, right? Those are all home games. They're against teams below the playoff line, and if Ottawa's going to prove that this is the year that they take that next step, and again, for Utah, I didn't say Ottawa, did I? But for Utah, maybe. I've had so many teams maybe. But going from Arizona to Utah, this is the year where I think this team is going to get better. One thing to keep in mind is they still have almost $10 million in cap space. So while people are talking about Gunther's deal and how expensive it is, this team has almost $10 million in cap space. So they could afford to pay Gunther, and as the cap goes up again next summer, they're going to have a ton of cap space. Utah's a team to keep an eye on still because of that fact. When you have that much cap space, and during the season, that number is going to go up. And so, because during the season you can accrue cap space, right? So it definitely means that if this team can stay near the playoff line once we get up to the trade deadline, they could be big players. Either as a third party to handle trades between two teams where neither of them have cap space, or maybe they add at the deadline, right? If they're close, they may want to add. Maybe they can find a defenseman as a rental. Maybe they rent a decent goaltender at the deadline, not because there's anything wrong with Vejmelka or Ingram, but because depth is good too. And if Vejmelka or Ingram have struggles this year with that nearly $10 million in cap space, they can go out and find somebody. So Utah, I think, I don't know that I see playoffs for Utah this season, but they're not that far off. And it still makes me feel bad for Arizona fans. Yes, they do. Yeah, no, they have fans. There are fans in Arizona because this was the year where things were supposed to start getting better, and now they're in Utah, right? So Utah will get the fruits of the labors of Arizona, and I think the Sergachev ad is a huge one, potentially. And there's a lot of potential here. Obviously, you need Hayden to click as a top center, but if he doesn't, let's just say Hayden has a terrible season. So then Cooley, Kerfoot, Stenlund, and Bukestad are your 1 through 4 down the middle. That's still not bad. So even if Hayden plays awful and just gets demoted and becomes a healthy scratch, once Bukestad's back, I think they have enough forward depth to cover it up. Which I have not been able to say about the Arizona Coyotes much over the last 8 years I've been doing these videos. So Utah definitely has that going for them, and we'll see what they do this coming season. But I think they're going to be all right. Again, if they go through playing Islanders, Rangers, and New Jersey, so that 3-game swing back east, and if they win 2 of those 3 games, provided, of course, they beat Chicago on Tuesday in the home opener, just get off to a good start. I say it every year. I'm saying it again here with Utah. Get off to a good start. And then as long as you play well from there, you should be a playoff team. Don't worry so much about the reputations of other teams in the division. Just go out and win your games. And then they have to go out and win theirs. And very often we see surprises as to who does or doesn't make the playoffs. So if you're a Utah fan, if you're a new fan of hockey, you got a pretty good team. Not great, not a Stanley Cup champion, I don't think, but definitely one to watch this year in the National Hockey League, as between the cap space and the fact they can roll 3 decent scoring lines, I don't see any reason why we won't see some improvement from them. But again, I don't have a jersey as of yet. Hoping to get the home and the away this year. Of course, it's a placeholder until the Yeti name is officially released in the new year, I guess. Worst kept secret in sports. I mean, yeah, just for Keller to say, well, Yeti, well, it's because we all know it's going to end up being the Yeti. They're going through whatever, unless they decide, that's not a name that's going to work for us, and they decide to overrule the fan vote. I think it's clearly going to be Yeti. But whatever name they choose, whatever they decide to go with, again, I think they've got a decent team here. So the question I have is, are they a playoff team? For me, I think they're going to be close. I think they're going to be playing important games once we get into February and March. But I think ultimately they probably fall short. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think there's an opening there for them to make the playoffs in the West? Which of Colorado, Dallas, Nashville, St. Louis, or Winnipeg, which of those 5 teams do you think they're going to be able to pass if they're going to make the playoffs? Because you can't finish 6th in the division to make the playoffs. It's just not possible. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like, and I say that because the top 3 teams in each division make it. So maximum of 5 teams in the division can make it. So which team would Utah pass to make the playoffs? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. It is an exciting time if you are a fan of this team that has just been transplanted from Arizona, and I wish them all the best. It is always enjoyable to see a new market and a whole new setup, and I'm looking forward to seeing even how just the broadcasts work and all that. It should be an interesting one. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.